Radhanath Swami. And Radhanath Swami makes this point that, we can clean the rivers, we can clean the air, we can clean the land, but until we clean the ecology of our own hearts, there won't be any transformation. Of course, both need to happen hand in hand. I'm not saying it's all, we all just wait to work on ourselves and the world will just get better one by one. I think we do have to be spiritual activists.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Experience Podcast. My name is Tejasva or TEX, and together, you and I are going to have amazing conversations with amazing people and learn so much through our experiences. This is a listener-supported podcast, so any level of Patreon subscription or one-time donation will be accepted with a lot of gratitude and used back to making this podcast experience even greater. Before we begin, I just wanted to thank everyone who has been supporting this podcast and my music journey. If you didn't know, I have just released a music album called Ikigai Part 1 Perception, and this was recently played on the BBC radio as well. You can head over to bit.ly/texikigai or follow the link in the description to find out more. In today's episode, I can't wait to welcome Nanda Gopa Prabhu. We're going to be talking about what it means to flourish from within and how that can be used to impact our lives. But first, let's take a deep breath and close our eyes and reflect on the word Lotus. Maybe it's a feeling, a memory, a person, an environment, or whatever else may come to mind. And whenever you're ready, you may open your eyes. Keep this thought in mind, maybe write it down on a piece of paper, because we will come back to it later in the episode. If you're comfortable, we'd love to know what you thought of, so please do share with us in the comments below, or feel free to message us. Let's begin. Welcome back to the Experience Podcast, everybody. In today's episode, we have a very, very special guest, Chirag Khelani. Some of you may already know him by the name of Nanda Gopa Prabhu. Now, Nanda Gopa Prabhu is somebody I really look up to. I especially admire the way that he has this way of getting something across really directly and honestly, but he does it in a really comforting way. Now, for those of you who don't know Nanda Gopa Prabhu, he was a monk who went on to become a lawyer at some top firms in London before becoming the Lotus coach. He now helps high achievers, entrepreneurs, and top-level business executives to flourish. But here's the catch. Not only from the outside, he also helps them flourish from within. Prabhu, it is an honor to have you on my podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Tejasva. Yeah, I'm excited to be here. When you told me about the podcast, I was very excited to have the opportunity to be part of it. I'm sure you're going to be doing some amazing work and have some really good speakers coming through. I know you already had Sutapa lined up. So yes, happy to follow in his footsteps always.
Oh, nice. So Prabhu, how are you and what have you been up to these days?
I'm good. I've been busy. Just kind of getting back into the face-to-face world of training, which is really nice after 18 months of lockdown. So we've been doing a lot of virtual training during that period, but you can't replicate the energy in a room. So it's been really nice traveling in and meeting people face-to-face and trying to convey some wisdom to help them in their professional lives.
Wow. So tell us a little bit about that. Tell us about what goes on in your professional world.
Yeah, so like you said in the introduction, my background is in law. After I quit law, I decided to, and I'm sure we'll come on to it, I decided to focus on coaching and training because I felt that was much more aligned with my purpose and my dharma, my calling in life. So I got myself a diploma in coaching and ICF accreditation, and then was doing one-to-one coaching. That's where the Lotus coach idea came from. And then I've from then moved on and I built my own corporate coaching and training business, Lotus Leadership. So I work with law firms, with banks, with consultancies all around the world, really. It can be from graduates to managers to senior leaders. But yeah, different leadership topics, essentially helping them to become better leaders which hopefully means that they can create a transformation within their organizations.
Wow, amazing. So, Prabhu, is it okay if I call you Prabhu in this podcast?
Yeah, of course you can. Yeah, of course you can.
Yeah, great. So, Prabhu, when I read your tagline, "Flourish from Within," it made a lot of sense to me. Especially because in the spirituality that we follow, we're always trying to find the deeper meaning behind everything that we do. Not just the big changes that happen in our lives, and not only the big decisions that we make in our lives, but also the small things that we do. Or seemingly what seem like small things that we do. So our actions, our words, our thoughts. So tell us a little bit about your tagline, "Flourishing from Within," and how that ties in with the lotus, which is the symbol of your business.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, flourish from within, as the tagline suggests, it's all about looking within. So we know happiness is an inside job. We know that if we can master our mind, we can master our life. And that was really the essence of what I was trying to get at. So many people, when they look for coaching, look for external performance. And the key point I wanted to make was, if you can get it right here, then the performance will naturally flow. So whilst I'm helping people in a material sense with their work, with their lives, the idea is, yes, if you can flourish from within, like the lotus, and that's why flourish. The lotus, I don't know if you know much about lotuses, but
Tell us
lotuses
a little bit more.
have kind of, they are a symbol for eternity. They're a symbol for transformation. It has a real resonance within the Vedic culture. Also, of course, a lotus springs from Vishnu's navel, and from there, the creator, the engineer of the world, Lord Brahma, is born. So the lotus is very special for me, very significant in my own life, because it reminds me of the Lord. But also from a kind of corporate perspective, people understand that if you want change, you need real transformation. And the lotus grows in very muddy water, actually. I don't know if you know that. But it's surrounded by mucky, muddy water. And nonetheless, it rises up and it flourishes every day. And every lotus is different, different vibrant colors that come out. There's also another kind of deep connection that I quite liked. And this comes from the Bhagavad Gita. And the idea is that you have to work in this world without being affected by what you're doing. So the lotus leaf example is given by Lord Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. The idea is that nothing sticks. So when it rains, the lotus has this waxy surface, which means the water will just fly off. So I really thought that's what I wanted to be known for as the lotus coach, someone who can help people navigate this world, be successful both spiritually and materially.
That is so beautiful, and making all these connections from our Vedic, text like the Bhagavad Gita, and I really like it. We talk about this a lot, actually. The lotus mindset as well. Of us being in this world but not of this world, and no matter how many impurities try and come our way, we try and grow from them. As you talked about the lotus growing from mud. I don't know if you've come across the word anti-fragile.
Yeah, of course I have. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's such a cool concept. And
Yeah.
when this word was introduced to me a couple of years ago, one of my friends introduced it to me, it really changed my perspective on how I look at our so-called failures and downfalls that happen in life. So I think it's a really, really amazing mindset to have. And I think the lotus is a perfect image to put into someone's head when we think of that. Thank you so much for sharing that. So,
yeah, it's an interesting one, because when I first did it, it caught the attention within the corporate world, but they thought it was quite weak. And some people say, well, the lotus, how does that work with, performance and the hard edge stuff that we're interested in? And that's exactly the point, that actually it is about being anti-fragile. It is about building deep resilience and understanding that everything that is coming our way for a reason. And we're meant to learn from it in order to progress on our journey, both materially and spiritually.
wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. So I feel like a lot of us, what we end up doing is, we look at people around us and we say, okay, XYZ is doing this, ABC is doing this. And we sort of form this idea in our head that we're meant to be doing something similar, And I've seen, fortunately, I've seen a lot of people who go down this path, and I find it a little bit dangerous sometimes that people succeed with this mindset. And the reason why I say that is because if we're doing it purely out of the fear of being left behind or out of a fear of not fitting into society, we're going to continue living that way for a really long time, you know? And I've seen people who have so-called material successes and don't really feel fulfilled or satisfied in their life, you know? And this is something that I guess not only them, but even someone like me experiences, because we achieve one thing and then we're like, okay, something's still missing, so we need something more. Then we go on to the next one. So that was either me coming to the UK, then going to Imperial, and I'm like, something's still missing. I'm not sure what's going on. So Prabhu, tell us a little bit about why is it so important that we not only look at our outside achievements? Why is it important to go in and realign or reconfigure our life to try and follow our dreams again?
Yeah, I mean, you already answered it. You said so-called success, and I think this is the problem. I think people, I think Covey gives the example of climbing a ladder up a wall, and it's a wall that you don't necessarily want to climb over. So you spend your whole time climbing, and you get there, and of course you get to the top, and you don't feel fulfilled because it isn't meant to be the direction you're meant to be traveling in. So it's something I definitely resonate with because I spent 10 years in the city as a lawyer. You could say it's successful from a material perspective, but even actually from a material perspective, how can you say it's successful if you're not feeling fulfilled? So yes, successful in terms of status, successful in terms of money, but actually the Gita teaches that we all have a dharma, we all have a nature, and we shouldn't waste our time living someone else's life because we are all born with a specific dharma, and the education system that we're brought up with doesn't really allow people to explore that properly, and you're kind of shoehorned into a particular career. And for most people it's too late, and then they end up settling and they just spend their life think I'm not happy, but it's a means to an end. And that certainly could have been me. And I did it for a long time, and I never really felt satisfied with what I was doing. But I just thought, well, who am I to complain? This is great, and there's many people that are queuing up, and would literally break an arm and a leg in order to be in the position that I am now. But yeah, I think it's essential for people to live their dharma, and of course that begins with self-awareness. And self-awareness requires a certain level of introspection, and most people don't have time to stop, so they're on the treadmill running so fast that they don't actually stop and reflect on what it is they need to achieve in order to flourish from within ultimately.
Wow. So it's interesting because you said a lot of people don't have time to look inside. And, the conversation that I had with Sutapa Prabhu last week was to do with, even if we do have the time, we're so scared,
Yeah.
And it's really interesting. And it makes me wonder sometimes, do we on purpose, and I'm sure this is the case subconsciously, do we on purpose bombard our brains day and night, from the moment we wake up to the moment we fall asleep, with so much, so that we're always occupied,
Yeah.
because we're running away in the other direction from our so-called demons. And, we talked a little bit about our inner demons and how one's model of the world breaks down. At least it did for me and a lot of people I know personally. When we started looking inside and asking the deeper questions, often what happened was friends would say, dude, just go back and study. You need to get a first when you graduate, It was either that or somebody was like, yeah, this is life, I'm grateful that I didn't stop, and I kept, like, things just kept happening in my life that made me question things again and again and again. It's a beautiful way of it's a divine intervention. I'd say, like, until and unless you don't learn the lesson, you're going to continue doing it. But the model of the world breaks down in our head, and it's so scary. But I feel like on a daily basis, we may not realize the small things that we're doing affect us negatively. but it manifests in the long run in really dangerous ways.
Yeah.
What are your views on that? Tell us a little bit about.
Yeah, it can do. I think, being alone with just your thoughts can be a scary place for a lot of people. It's why people struggle with different forms of meditation and almost want to drown their consciousness and thoughts with external stimuli. So whether that's some form of intoxication or it's just, putting on the TV or in modern day context, probably a TikTok of some sort, to literally just, it's a form of escapism. Because when you have to actually deal with what the thoughts are, that can be difficult if you're not very good at controlling your mind, and also desires, and being very honest with yourself about what's going on. So thinking about my career, I probably knew very early on, I may even say that I probably knew during my law degree that law wasn't really for me.
Wow.
And I do remember having that thought in the back of my mind: do I really want to continue with this? Do I want to get a training contract? Because this is a law degree. I don't have to go and get a training contract. I don't have to go on and work in a city firm. But until you really knew what else you were going to do, you just kind of stay on that track. And the reason that you, despite having those feelings of something isn't right and I need to change something and shift something up, because of fear, ultimately, fear of failure or fear of the unknown, you end up just doing what you've always done. And so you do need a certain level of courage. And I think that's where Krishna consciousness really helped me, because I understood that actually it isn't just all about me. This isn't all on my shoulders. Actually, there's someone that's got my back, and someone who's much bigger, stronger, smarter than me, i.e. God. And for me, that was a real, I think once I took to spirituality and I started to understand how the philosophy interweaves into my daily actions and daily thoughts, then it gave me the courage to say, okay, well, I need to do this, because Krishna does say very clearly that we have a Sanatan Dharma, an eternal Dharma, and we also have a Svadharma. We also have a material duty in this world. And it doesn't necessarily mean being a lawyer, a trader, a doctor, or anything else that might make other people happy. But it's the thing that you are good at, the thing that you can contribute to the world with, and the thing that you enjoy. And so that takes a bit of work, and many people are now trying to find their purpose. Of course, it's a big thing in the world at the moment. But yeah, it starts with getting really comfortable with being in your own space. And that is difficult for a lot of people. A lot of people can't go to sleep unless the television is on, for example.
Oh wow.
And just because it's like a numbing sensation that is useful for them, as opposed to just close your eyes and then deal with what's going on inside.
I'll just share something that's popped up in my head.
Please.
In some ways, this is like, looking at what could have been a really small problem in the past, but because we consistently neglected it, it's manifested in some really dangerous ways. And this actually reminds me, when I was really young, from up until the age of 15, I was constantly sick. Something or the other, some disorder, some disease, hospitalized, surgery, whatever. And I remember in one of these incidents, what had happened was I got a really, really high fever, and I had to be taken to the emergency. And they fed me a few antibiotics, and they had to hospitalize me for 2 days. And after 2 days, I was like, okay, what now? They said, oh, you're free to go. We fixed it. I said, okay, but what was it? They said, I don't know, but we fixed it. And I said, are you sure? Like, is there something I should not be having? Like, can I have certain foods? Can I not have certain foods? What's going on? They said, no, it's fine. Don't worry about it. 3 days later, I developed this disorder called HSP.
Yeah.
Which is, for those of you who don't know what HSP is, it's a disorder that happens in younger kids, and your entire lower portion of the body is filled with red, sort of pimples full of pus, and it's really disgusting and really itchy, And this story always reminds me of, something happens to us, we get a headache, we want to fix the headache as soon as possible so we can continue living with our lives. But as soon as that headache is fixed, we never think about what caused the headache in the first place. So we keep on removing the symptoms, but the root problem was never solved. And because the root problem was never solved, it is now going to manifest in even worse ways.
Yes.
And yesterday I was listening to this podcast by Jay Shetty and Mel Robbins.
Mm-hmm.
And Mel Robbins was talking about sometimes we neglect ourselves so much and we feed ourselves so much negativity that even looking at ourselves in front of a mirror gives you anxiety.
Yeah.
It crumbles your stomach. It makes you go crazy. And
Yeah.
she talked about how small things can have such a massive impact on our brains. And she talked about giving yourself a high five in the morning, which I found really, really nice.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of us will feel a little silly doing that.
Mm-hmm.
But you know Kalki, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good friend of mine.
Great friend of yours, yes. Last year for Imperial Kesisok, he gave us a meditation talk. And he said that, if you're really feeling sad, just give a fake smile, even if it's fake. And then he did it in front of the camera. And he's like, I know I look a little bit silly, but it's forcing me to feel happy. And this is what yoga will do to you as well. So I found it really interesting how waking up with the mindset that, okay, I'm going to look at myself in the mirror and give myself a high five, because your brain's already programmed that every time you give somebody a high five, you automatically get a dopamine rush.
Yeah.
Which I think is so amazing. I just thought I'd share that because anybody who's feeling scared to have a conversation with themselves, and I know it can be really scary, especially when you're going through a tough time, there is a lot of help out there. There's a lot of ways that you can, try and overcome this. And I would just want you to know that you're not alone. Yeah, I just thought I'd share that.
No, it's a really useful share. And I think self-love, of course, is, the topic of the day. And many people speak about self-love. Whenever I reflect on that term, I think the challenge is that people don't know what the self is or who the self is. And therefore, they don't really know what to love. And you are right, material civilization very much has a symptomatic approach to any problems. So the example that I would give is in material civilization, if you go to the doctor and you've got a boil, the doctor will generally say, just put some ointment on that boil. Whereas the Vedic solution would be purify the blood in order to stop you having boils in the first place. And I think that is a consistent theme with material problems being solved with material solutions usually ends up with more problems. And therefore you have to really find spiritual solutions. And I can talk a little bit about what that means. But ultimately, going back to the point that I was making, it means understanding who you are, understanding that you are a spirit soul, and understanding your relationship with God and your relationship to all other living entities. If we can truly understand this very simple principle, then imagine what that will do for our relationships with the world. Imagine how we will treat the earth. Currently in the UK, there's a big thing about insulate Britain, and they're blocking off roads. It's an environmental group. It's a spin-off, I think, from some of the other movements that were there earlier. And I really admire them. I admire what they're trying to do. I know it causes a lot of frustration and angst for a lot of people, but I like the fact that they are trying to take a stand. But I don't think that we're going to find a solution by blocking a road. Ultimately, I know that they're trying to raise awareness for their particular campaign. But really, if we want to create a change in the world, we have to create a change in consciousness. We have to raise our consciousness. And that's where I think Krishna consciousness is such a practical philosophy, because people may say, what are you doing for the world? But actually, there is no better thing than raising your consciousness individually and then becoming an instrument of love and compassion for the rest of the world.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I love that so much. There's a quote by, I think it was Albert Einstein. He said that you can't solve a problem with the same consciousness that created it.
Yeah.
And I just think that's amazing. I think people often have a hard time understanding why making yourself a better person automatically turns the world into a better place. Not just for yourself, but even for people around you and even for people who aren't around you, actually, because it always has this beautiful butterfly effect.
Definitely.
And I first discovered this when I read the book The Secret.
Yeah.
And they always talked about, if you want to help the world, and I've been screaming about this ever since I was young. I was like, I'm going to change the world. I'm going to change the world. But people are like, okay, you say that a lot, but what are you doing? We don't see you doing anything.
Mm.
And I'd always feel really guilty. But when I read this book, I said, oh, wow.
Mm.
Actually, the one best thing you can do is improve yourself. And
Yeah.
there's a really beautiful quote in Krishna consciousness by one of the Swamis. And he says, the best gift you can give to somebody is a better version of yourself,
Yeah,
because then there's
definitely.
more to give.
Yeah, definitely. Well, just thinking about the environment and pollution point, there's a really nice
Mm,
quote by Radhanath Swami, and Radhanath
mm,
Swami makes this point that we can clean the rivers, we can clean the air, we can clean the land, but until we clean the ecology of our own hearts, there won't be any transformation. And it goes back to this point about flourishing within. You can put
mm,
limits. For example, with CO2, they're trying to put limits on the amount of gases and emissions that are released. But until people really understand why are these limits in place, what harm is really being done, there isn't going to be a check. So of course both need to happen hand in hand. I'm not saying
mm.
it's all, we all just wait to work on ourselves and the world will just get better one by one. I think we do have to be spiritual activists. So we don't need to just change ourselves. We have to become spiritual activists. It's not about just getting our own house in order. We have to understand the whole world is our house. The whole world is our
Mm,
family. And so a key
mm,
principle behind Krishna consciousness or bhakti is having genuine compassion. And genuine compassion means doing the difficult work, stepping outside of our comfort zone to really try and make a difference. It's Steve Jobs, I think, who famously says, try and make a dent in the universe. So for us, that dent could be just impacting one life and really
mm.
helping them to grow spiritually, or just, support them in their own mind, body, and soul. But yeah, I think we can be a bit more ambitious than that, depending on what capability and facilities we have available to us.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. Prabhu, tell us a little bit about how you got into spirituality in the first place then.
Yeah, I got in at university, so
Mm,
not too dissimilar to your story. When I was at university, I was meant to go to LSE. In fact, ended up at a different
mm,
university, and that ended up being a blessing in disguise. And I think that's quite a lesson in itself. How you think you're going to go down one path, but the Lord has another plan for you. So yeah, I went to a couple of talks at university, and they were phenomenal speakers. I was just very blown away by their rational approach, their intelligence, their logic, just all the all the things you might consider when you think about spirituality, your own preconceptions and judgments as to what it means. And then you meet
mm,
people, from different ethnicities, different backgrounds, male, female, young, old, and they're all singing from the same hymn sheet, so to speak. And they're all speaking about, actually, we have this special power within us, our spiritual life. And when we enliven that, we really start to live. And for me, it was groundbreaking. Really, I just thought, wow, I've got so many questions, and they've actually got answers to a lot of
mm,
my questions. And I think that'll be a similar theme. I mean, I'm sure whoever else you have on the podcast, and you ask them, how did you come to spirituality or Krishna consciousness? The theme is the same. It's I was maybe not even looking for answers, but I had
mm,
questions definitely in the back of my mind around who am I, why am I here, what is my purpose in life, is there something beyond this, what happens at the time of death, how can I be successful in this world, what are kind of the laws of nature. And I found that the Bhakti tradition had the most comprehensive explanation of
mm.
all of that, and just made a lot of sense to me. It was just immediate. I just thought, wow, this is what I've been looking for. And so, yeah, I started my spiritual practice. That's kind of the theory, all the wisdom that is in the Vedas, the knowledge. And then, of course, there's the practice as well, in order to realize the self.
Wow. Wow. So it started with KC Sock then.
Basically started with Casey Sock. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Big shout out to everyone at Casey Sock.
Yes.
In fact, you're giving a talk at Imperial Casey Sock tomorrow, aren't you?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it's the
Well,
first one of the year. So yeah, it's nice to give back. I think
definitely.
I was at university 2001 when I kind of started my journey in Christian consciousness. So yeah, that's like, what is that, 20 years? It's a long
Yeah,
time. Yeah, long
20
time.
years.
Yeah.
How did you discover Casey Sock? Was there somebody who dragged you? Somebody put posters up, and you're like, okay, this seems wishy-washy. I want to try it out.
Yeah, I think I was a bit taken aback because one of the first speakers I heard from is someone I'm sure you may have heard of as well, Bhuta Bhavna
Oh,
Prabhu.
amazing.
Yeah, and his name at the time was Eddie, because he wasn't initiated, or he wasn't using his initiated name,
Hmm.
and so Edward, yeah, and I was just really, someone said, oh, there's a guy called Eddie. He's speaking at the Krishna Society. He's black bodied. He's really cool, and I was thinking, what? Like that doesn't. I was, sheer ignorance, just very, very surprised.
Yeah.
And like his first presentation was about the law of karma, and he started by explaining Newton's third law of action: every action has a reaction, and therefore it makes perfect sense that anything we do in this world will have a reaction. It's a natural law.
Hmm.
Now, of
Hmm.
course, growing up in a community, I wasn't Christian conscious, but I certainly heard of karma, and it wasn't an alien concept to me. But I'd never heard it explained in that way. It was just, what comes around goes around. Deal with it and try and be a good person. And so, yeah, it really resonated with me. And then when I started reading Srila Prabhupada's books and getting more into it,
Hmm.
I just found it was, yeah, just a never-ending mine to just kind of keep going deeper and deeper, more and more gold at the bottom.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I genuinely love hearing people's starting stories,
Mm.
especially if you knew how they were before.
Yeah.
So some of my friends from 2, 3 years ago, so I found Casey Sock 2 years ago. So some of my friends are like, "Are you okay?" I said, "Yeah. Why? What's happened?"
Yeah.
I said, "I don't know, man. You just talk really differently. You do things a little differently. What happened to you?" I
Mm.
said, are you saying in a positive way or a negative way? They're like, "I don't know, but there's something different about you."
Mm.
And obviously, when I go on to explain, some people are very open and they're like, "Oh, that's really interesting." Some people even showed up on Casey Sock,
Mm.
when you were there last year. But
Mm.
then there'll be some people who are like, "Oh, but you're not even fully convinced, or you're not even like fully aware of everything that's going on. So like, how can you take this decision?"
Mm.
But
It's funny when people say that, though, isn't it? Because
yeah,
there are so many things that we do in terms of decisions where you're not fully convinced. Like, you spend X amount of money to go to university to get a degree, and you've got no idea whether you're going to end up doing anything related to that degree or not. So
yeah,
that faith argument is such an interesting one, because I think none of us know for sure
mm,
anything. And therefore you've got to have some reasonable faith as opposed to blind faith.
yeah,
And you take one step at a time, and then your faith grows as you take each step. So no one's saying that you should be at a level of full surrender in order to surrender. That doesn't make sense. You dip your toe in the water. You're like, okay, this is nice. Now I want to go a little bit further and further and further. And the beauty of Krishna consciousness, as you well know, is
mm,
that there is no pressure. It's your journey, and it's up to you to take it as fast or as deep as you want to go. And that's what I love about it.
wow. So probably for me, it was firstly the people, in Casey Sock, that when
Mhm.
I was around them, I felt very different.
Yeah.
I felt like I could be a little bit more vulnerable. Whereas with most other people, I always had this sort of wall around me, because I didn't
Hmm.
want people to poke me or say things to me or whatever. But with these people, it was very, very nice, and they were the ones who sort of inspired me to go a little bit deeper,
Hmm.
you know. But as you said, when you opened up a few of Srila Prabhupada's books, and
Hmm.
you really enjoyed what you read. That wasn't the case for me, actually.
Hmm.
Um, Not surprisingly, I'm sure this is going to be the case for a lot of people. You open a book and you hear him say one thing, and you're like, I feel attacked.
Mm.
Just being very, very open here. So the
Yeah, of
first time I
course.
opened up, one of the things, and there's this one phrase he uses which I love now but didn't like in the past. He's like, "You are a fool."
Rascal, fool. Yes.
Yeah, and it's just very straightforward. But I had this, I guess, because of the people who were around me, and the people who were teaching us the Gita at the time were so loving that I said, okay, maybe Srila Prabhupada is saying these things, but these people are living it. And that really inspired me to look at all these so-called rules and regulations and all the things that are hard to swallow pills. But it gave me the strength to continue, keep the faith. And if I ever had any questions, I felt supported to ask these questions.
Yeah.
And even a few days ago, I was with a couple of people, and even though we were in a pub, I was talking about spirituality. And so a couple of 2-3 people are surround me, and they're like, I don't really like this whole spirituality thing. I don't vibe with it. And I said, you literally just used a spiritual term in saying that, and they're like, oh no, but we are engineers, we're scientists. How can you just, blindly accept anything? And I said, but I'm not blindly accepting anything. It's we are encouraged to ask questions, and if we blindly accept something, we are discouraged to blindly accept something. And a lot of people think that by asking too many questions, we're showing that we don't have the faith, where actually, in my opinion, it's quite the opposite, because
Yeah.
when we ask the questions, we actually want to improve our faith, right? So that's my sort of side of the story. I'd love to hear, what are some of the habits that changed before and after you found Krishna consciousness? And, when you were reading these books, what inspired you to continue going in that direction, despite all the problems that you may have faced, if you did face any?
Yeah. Well, the first thing to say around, questioning, that is very much a sign of intellect. You're meant to question. And if you look at all of our scriptures, they're all question and answer. If you look at the Srimad Bhagavatam, Maharaj Parikshit is asking questions. He's saying, okay, you say that, but what about this? And what about that? So same in the Bhagavad Gita, Arjun, Krishna makes the point, and then Arjun asks again, and then again and again and again. So certainly it's not a sign of a lack of faith. It deepens our understanding the more that we do ask. Obviously, the way in which we ask is critical. If you're asking without really wanting to know the answer, then it's a waste of everyone's time. And I've been in, I've given talks, for example, where someone raises their hand and they're asking a question really just to be a smart ass. And, just to make a point. It's kind of an ego thing. Let me see if I can smash this person down or make them look silly. Whereas if they're asking with the genuine desire to understand, then they will get a different response and the Lord will reciprocate accordingly. So yeah, just on that first point, just to say that, yeah, it really is important to ask questions. And I think it links to your second question. For me, the journey was around questions. The more that I went in, the more I would ask questions. And as I say, I just often found answers that resonated with me. And I guess part of me was hoping I wouldn't find answers, because it would mean I wouldn't need to give up any of these things that I was doing previously. But it just made a whole load of sense. So yeah, I was already vegetarian. So I was vegetarian at 14, and then the other habits, like I was doing what any other teenager / first year university student would do. So yeah, there was a transformation. I do remember that, my girlfriend at the time, who is now my wife and mother of my 2 children, was a little bit shocked. I turned up and I was like, okay, so by the way, this is what I'm doing now. I'm following these 4 regular principles. And she's like, what? I'm like, yeah, that's what I'm doing now. So yeah, there was a bit of a shock, and there was a bit of immaturity on my part as well. Just kind of that radical excitement when you find something new. But that was all part of the journey, and over time it became deeper and more cemented, and really understood why I was doing what I did. And eventually you get a higher taste where you don't want to do things that you know are going to block you from making progress. So just like if you want to become a top athlete and you know that pizza tastes good, but pizza's bad for me in terms of what I'm trying to achieve, then that pizza suddenly doesn't taste so good because you know it's not giving me the higher taste. It's blocking me from achieving the higher taste of what I really want to achieve in life. And so it was as simple as that. You start, it's always said if you add Krishna to your life, then it's much easier to give up bad habits, because essentially you start getting that experience, that spiritual experience that we're all craving for, because as spirit souls, we are Sat Chit Ananda, and we are naturally full of knowledge, full of bliss, and of course, eternal. And so seeking happiness is our birthright. And of course, it's often said we're just looking in the wrong places for that happiness.
Amazing. That is really, really powerful. Hopefully in season 2, we can obviously talk a little bit more about how certain foods are in different modes,
Yeah,
and
sure.
how they affect our consciousness, and how doing certain activities are also similar in that sense. So, Prabhu, tell us a little bit about how you were able to take all of these things. Actually, before I even asked that question, you became a monk right
Yeah.
after university. Tell us what happened there. What flipped the switch in your head and say, okay, I'm going to become a monk before I do anything else in life?
Yeah, it was an immersive experience. I knew that I was going to go on and having done the law degree, I knew I was going to do the legal practice course. I knew I was probably going to do a training contract. As I said, I hadn't found an alternative path at that point. So I thought, when else will I get an opportunity to do this? And it was the equivalent of a gap year. Many people in the UK do a gap year right after the A levels. And for me, I never did. I went straight on to university. So it was essentially my gap year, and it was a year, and I loved it. And, I probably would have extended it if it wasn't for the fact I already had work lined up and, all the rest of it. But yeah, it was a wonderful experience. I will never get an experience like that again, in terms of full immersion, waking up from 3:30 in the morning to going to bed at night, 9:30, 10, and just being in a fully Christian conscious environment, whether you are, reading, whether you are studying, whether you are teaching, whether you are cleaning the pots or the bins, whether you're chanting, whether you're singing, whether you're doing arti, whether you're out on the streets, sharing this knowledge, doing book distribution, whether you're going to KC Socks and giving talks there. It was just a very fun, enlivening experience, which I will always look back on with great memories.
Wow. I did that for 10 days with a couple of friends.
Oh,
so
nice.
When I went to the Panda Center retreat.
Yeah.
We did that for 10 days and we were exhausted.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we lived so much.
Yeah. You live so much in just those 10 days. The problem with the Panda Center retreats is you don't actually sleep. So that's why you're exhausted, because not only are you going to bed at, because I remember obviously from organizing the trips and going to the trips myself, you're in your rooms and you're asking questions till like 4 a.m, and then half an hour later it's up for Mangal Aartis. So that it is not sustainable, but it's absolutely an immersive experience that you can't replicate in any other way.
No, not at all. Speaking of, you talked a little bit about, you did things in your first year as other first year people do. So I don't know if you know this, but Shesha Prabhu was also on the podcast.
Okay.
And he told me a little story. He said that he had gotten into spirituality before, university, and you and him had already been associated before.
Okay. Yeah.
And do you know what story I'm going to say?
No, I don't know what story, but I'm trying to remember. Yeah, I've known Shesha for a long time, but he's a couple of years younger than me. So yeah, possibly when he was kind of around the manor, and I may have even been on the sabbatical. Maybe that's where we connected. Yeah.
Okay, so he said he was going to move into halls, and he was confused. He said he was asking all the other people and all the other mentors, should I do this? Should I not do this? Should I go here? Should I not go here? And in these specific halls, and I'm first year freshman. Should I do these things or not do these things? And everybody else was giving very, answers like, oh, it's okay. It's part of your experience. If you really want to do it, just do it. And then there was you.
Did I say something very, very direct? I imagine I did.
So in the intro, I said, when I talked about you in the intro, I said, you have a way of saying something really directly and honestly, but you do it from a place of comfort. And I do mean that.
Yeah.
Because most other people, they'll pretend like they're trying to take care of us and give us good advice. But, we mentioned this word ego. It comes from a place of ego a lot of the times because you want to prove somebody else right or wrong. But because you consciously don't do that, there's a blanket of comfort around it. So whatever you do say, it makes sense. Maybe it's just something you have to hear, but you will always give a solution to it. No, I just thought I'd share that because he told me that in the podcast, and I said I will make sure this comes up when I have the podcast with Nanda Prabhu. So Prabhu, I was asking earlier, how did you take what you learned at KC and your time in your sabbatical as a monk, and how were you able to apply that as a lawyer?
Well, I think there was lots of lessons. Of course, there's kind of interpersonal lessons in terms of dealing with different people. There was lessons around my own productivity and thinking about we talked about the mind and how can I really bring my best to my career, long hours, challenging, etc. But the main lesson for me, and this comes from the Bhagavad Gita directly, is that we aren't in control of the result. We're only in control of the endeavor. And success is in trying hard. So whether it was law or something else, that's something that obviously has always stuck with me, that then you don't feel frustrated. Like whatever happens, as long as you've tried your best, it really doesn't matter. And I think that one thing that people used to say to me in law is that they would say, you're very, very chilled, like very laid back, like everything is like falling apart all around. There's like a crazy, chaotic corporate deal about to happen. This has gone wrong and everyone's panicked and you're just kind of seem very zen during that whole situation. And I said, literally it comes back to Covey and, circle of influence, circle of concern. And for me, what can I control? What is in my circle of influence and what is in my circle of concern? And of course, for us as practicing spiritualists, you understand even what is in my circle of control, there's someone else in control of that as well, i.e. Krishna. And so for me, I think that was the big takeaway. Like I was always very calm. I was always very level-headed because of my practice of spirituality. And yeah, and just like you said, some people really liked that and appreciated it and valued it. And other people were just a bit spooked by it and didn't really understand what was going on. And, felt maybe insecure by it or felt I didn't care enough, or, people will always have different points of view, but it's important to know that you can't please everyone. And, going back to your really important point that you made earlier in the podcast around self-love and appreciation and self-validation, really, doesn't matter what you do, there'll always be people to criticize. There'll always be people to poke fun. You just have to do what you think is right and surround yourself with people that are going to support you, love you along the way. So, even with this podcast, there'll be some people saying, oh, here he goes, here's someone else trying to do a podcast or this or that. And you'll have different, doubts in your own head. Maybe they're the kinds of thoughts that might come in your own head. But the fact is, you're trying to do it as a service. You're trying to do it because you want to share wisdom. You want to connect people to different, thoughts. And you've already done that. You've already, had Sutapa and Shesha and others. And we know for a fact that hearing from them will benefit people's lives. So really, you're just an instrument in all of this. It doesn't really matter whether people like you or not. You're doing a service. If you help one person, Srila Prabhupada would say, if you can help even one person, then I'll consider my whole mission to be a success. So there you go. If you can just help one person, and of course, in trying to help just that one person, you'll end up helping many, many more.
That is really powerful. So, ladies and gentlemen, for those of you who don't know, a couple of months back, I actually approached Nanda Prabhu and I said, Prabhu, I have this idea and I don't know if I should do it.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
And it was about this podcast because the idea of creating a podcast came to me 2 years ago when I've always loved having really deep conversations with people. And a lot of the times people said, oh, I really wish we recorded this, you know? But at the same time, I was becoming even more and more spiritual. And, we have this thing, there's this graph in my head that goes like a bump. It's like how much you know versus how much you think you know.
Yeah.
And initially it goes up and then you realize, oh my God, I do not know anything in this world.
Yeah.
And then it
Yeah.
goes down. With that comes a lot of humility. But I was going through one of those phases where I was like, who am I to even do something like this? That was one of my pitfalls, actually. But Nanda Gopa Prabhu really helped me get out of that. And, as he said right now, very, very beautifully, that, I'm just an instrument in trying to connect people to themselves. That's why this entire thing is called The Experience, because I want to show people that it's everything that we go through in life. It happened for a reason. It's those downfalls that, induce certain thoughts in us. And if we approached it in the right way, we became a lot more powerful than before. And I love how this beautifully comes back to the Lotus that we talked about initially. And I think this is such a perfect way to end the Experience podcast season 1. You are the last episode.
All right. Okay. There we go.
And I love how beautifully this ended. Prabhu, thank you so much for being on this podcast. It's been an honor to have you. Thank you for sharing everything. And I'll definitely drop a few links down in the description if people want to follow. He is on Instagram as the Lotus Coach.
Yeah.
He's got an amazing website. And if anybody wants, we have a couple of, so we've got Casey Sock. So if you're a student, you can definitely go to the Casey Sock in your university. If not, just, message me if you're really, really keen. I'm sure we can always find a way to get you more involved and, help you find yourself deep within and improve your life and improve other people's lives. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. And I hope to see everybody soon. Take care. Thank you so much for tuning in, everybody. We really hope you learned something new. Before we end, let's take another moment to reflect on the word Lotus. After this, think about what changed between your feelings before and after the episode. This podcast was created so we can listen to all our stories and learn from each other, because there's so much that we all experience in our individual journeys. Being able to have even a small glimpse of someone's journey can add so much perspective to our lives, help us grow together, and be able to better understand ourselves and each other. Despite all our differences, there's so much more that we have in common. This is a listener-supported podcast, so any level of Patreon subscription or one-time donation will be accepted with a lot of gratitude and used back to making this podcast experience even greater. The different subscriptions can be found on my Patreon page, which will be linked in the description. This was recorded during COVID times with little to no professional equipment, so the quality may sometimes vary. We apologize for this inconvenience, but despite that, we hope you were able to connect with the message of this episode. Once again, thank you so much for tuning in, and we hope to see you next week. Take care.